Hey guys, and welcome to the Band Rants channel, your home for NFL predictions, projections, and of course, your periodic rant. Now, I've been away for a little bit, and I do apologize for that, but I am back, and today I'm going to be ranking all 32 teams from S tier all the way to F tier, and in the description below, I'm going to be explaining sort of how I define each tier, and if you like what you see, please make sure to leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And we'll start with a division winner from last year, the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee's been a team that they started off average and they got a little bit better and they've stayed better. I was actually very surprised to see them be a first round knockout last year. I was actually very shocked about that. I thought everyone thought they'd make a bigger run, but that's okay. This is still a team that is still solid. I'm going to put them in the A tier. The reason I'm not putting them in the S tier is because Arthur Smith is gone, and I do expect the offense to take a step back a little bit, but their offseason's been decent. I wouldn't say spectacular, but they did make a couple of signings to keep an eye on, like Bud Dupree, for example. So I'm very curious to see what happens there. Next ones are the Miami Dolphins. Miami was a bit of a random surprise, but I also think they benefited from a last place schedule. They did, to their credit, go 10-6 with what they had, but I also think a lot of that was Ryan Fitzpatrick, and Tua really didn't have too much to do with that because he wasn't starting, but now they are starting Tua, and their offseason's been okay, and they do still have 2 first-round picks, so I'm going to put these guys in the B tier. I do expect the Dolphins to drop off a little bit, because you don't have that cushion of Ryan Fitzpatrick. You do have a trickier schedule, second place one, which would include games against Baltimore and the Raiders, who you lost to last year, and the NFC South, as well as your division. So I do expect a drop off, but we'll see what happens. Speaking of another second place team that they would face, the Colts. I'm going to be putting the Colts in the A tier. The Colts are a team that is very underrated. They did lose in the first round last year, but I actually did almost have the Colts record dead on as well. Phillip Rivers is gone, but Carson Wentz is in, and that's not as good as Rivers. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but Frank Reich, the last time Frank Reich and Carson Wentz were together, they won the Super Bowl. Now, okay, I know it was Nick Foles, whatever, but Carson Wentz was still playing at an MVP level at the time, and if there's any talent that Carson Wentz has yet to tap into, Frank Reich can tap into it this year, so we'll keep an eye on that. But the Colts do still have a really good roster, and they do have a really good team, and Frank Reich has never truly been anything worse than 7 wins as head coach for the Colts, so that's not too bad of a starting point. Dallas, I think, is a dark horse in the NFC, not because they're really amazing, but because they're going to have I believe, a third place schedule, which is really good for a team like Dallas that does have a decent string of wide receivers, that does have probably a decent head coach in Mike McCarthy. I'm a little on the fence about him. I'm going to put Dallas, the NFC East, I don't want to put anybody in the A or B tier. So I'll put Dallas in the C tier. I think that's probably a fair place to put them. The NFC East has been an absolute joke for the last couple of years. They haven't really been relevant since the Eagles won the Super Bowl about 3 or 4 years back. And since then, they haven't really done much. It's embarrassing that somebody has to win it, but that's just how the NFL works. I won't spend too long on that. Tampa, they are probably a team that I feel more than comfortable putting in the S tier. Not just because they won the Super Bowl, not just because Goatman great, but Drew Brees has retired, and with ease, that makes Tampa the team to beat in the division. You really don't have much competition here. If you're just going off of offense, then Atlanta could make it interesting. All the weapons on this divisional offense could make it interesting, but in terms of the quarterback position, you can't really argue. And I won't argue. And in terms of defense, Tampa's, I believe, was top 5 last year. Minnesota, another team that thrives on defense. They were 7-9 last year. They had a drop off, but I really think this is unfair to characterize the Vikings as a team that was bad last year, because if you think about what they lost and the fact that they couldn't replace them, I actually expected them to do worse than they did. So I think the Vikings can only improve here. They've got a third place schedule, a little bit simpler than normal for them. I'm going to put these guys in the B tier because I see a lot of room for improvement here. They do still have a solid offense. I mean, you could say whatever you want. The jury's still out on Kirk Cousins. But I think Kirk Cousins is a better answer than, some of these teams have that are like third and fourth place. And speaking of third place, the Cleveland Browns. Now, they went 11. I don't want to hear about them going and beating the Steelers in the postseason. Anyone could have beat the Steelers in December. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure everybody did, because the Steelers were just god-awful in December and in the winter as a whole. Cleveland have benefited from an easier schedule last year, in my opinion. I think they really had an easier time with the NFC East, with 2 Bengals games, a third-place schedule with teams that were really just not that great, and they still lost to the Jets. That's pretty embarrassing because only 2 teams lost to the Jets. I'm going to put the Browns in the C tier. I'm not going to be too harsh on them, but I do see a dip with a trickier schedule this year. A third-place schedule this year has teams like New England and the Chargers on it, so I do expect the Browns to have a trickier time. Chicago, I'm going to put in the D tier. Another team I don't want to hear about making the postseason, because we all know the Bears should not have been there. They were a complete embarrassment. The Saints probably could have rested Drew Brees that day and still won. Offensive problems, which they really shouldn't have considering their coaching. Coaches on the hot seat, probably going to get fired. Defense is okay, but I think Chicago having a second place schedule with quarterback issues does not do them any favors. New York, the Giants, I'm going to put in the D tier. I mean, coming in second place in the NFC East last year with a 6-10 record is really not what I would call amazing. There are teams that actually came in last place that did better than the Giants, and that's saying a lot. San Francisco. But the Giants, I think, are a team that just never really got back to the potential that they had when they won the Super Bowl in 2011, and we're almost a decade later. They did have another playoff berth with Eli Manning at one point, but they haven't really been the same since. They've been just mediocre, and I don't see that improving anytime soon. I do think the signing of Kenny Golladay will make it interesting, and if they draft another wide receiver, you could see Daniel Jones's numbers improve, which would make the argument for the Giants being a sleeper team a bit better. But right now, I'm just not seeing it. I'll have to obviously wait until after the draft and do another determination. And speaking of the draft, Jacksonville. My prediction 2 years running that Jacksonville would be the team to land Trevor Lawrence is aging like a fine wine. Very happy about that. But that being said, Jacksonville, I'm going to put these guys in the D tier because of a couple of things. They have a very tricky schedule. The NFC West. They've still got Titans and Colts twice a year. They still have the AFC East. So their schedule is not doing them any favors. And as good as I think Trevor Lawrence has the potential to be in the league, the Jaguars front office, in my opinion, played it safe during the offseason. They didn't really make any big signings other than Shaq Griffin and Marvin Jones, which I wouldn't really call Marvin Jones a big signing. Shaq Griffin, I mean, okay, you get yourself a decent corner to pair with E.J. Henderson, but that's not going to really have anything to do with Trevor Lawrence, which is, let's be honest, what the Jaguars offseason is going to basically focus on. So I think Jacksonville really dropped the ball there. So I think they're going to have to take another year or two to rebuild. They do have a second first-round pick this year, which makes it interesting, but don't expect any miracles here. Same thing with Denver. I'm going to put them in the D tier. I don't think any AFC West team is really bottom of the barrel. I think Denver has underperformed what they actually have. But I think that the head coach they have, Vic Fangio, his guys do play hard for him. And I think that if Denver answers their quarterback position this year, if they get that down, then they could be a 7 or 8 win team. They're not really a horrible team. There's no stability at the quarterback position. And I don't care how good of a head coach, defensive mastermind you are. If you don't have that answer, you're not going to have anything. And quarterbacks, San Francisco, I'm going to put these guys I'll put them a little bit above, probably the best D tier team that I have right now. Because again, I don't see any NFC West team being bottom of the barrel. It takes a lot to be in the F tier, and San Francisco doesn't have that. Yeah, they don't trust Jimmy Garoppolo. They're probably going to grab Mac Jones or Justin Fields this year, or Trey Lance possibly in the draft. But San Francisco's defensive line, you can't question that. Nick Bosa is going to be healthy now, so I do expect their defense to improve a little bit from last year. And you do still have a couple of building blocks on offense, like George Kittle and Deebo Samuel. But I think San Francisco is still going to have a tougher time with how much their division's improved. The Lions, I'm going to put in the F tier. Thank you, Matt Patricia, for being a complete waste of time and a complete waste of existence in Detroit. This is a team I've enjoyed watching fail because I don't get why they fired Jim Caldwell. But either way, losing Matt Stafford was probably the final nail in the coffin for the Lions. They could be interesting at the end of 2023 when they have cashed in all 4 of their first-round picks, including next year's 5 if you count this year. But don't expect any miracles with Jared Goff starting in, I don't even know if it's I think it's Dan Campbell's playbook, because he won't have Sean McVay, he won't have Kenny Golladay to throw to, won't have Sean McVay to take calls from, so this is going to be a team that is going to have a lot of trouble if they haven't already. Kansas City, look, I don't want to hear about Super Bowl 55 defining this team because it doesn't. They just won the Super Bowl the year before, to be fair, and they've been in the AFC title game, hosting the AFC title game when Tom Brady was in that conference. Yeah, I know, they lost it, but still, it's impressive to host competitive consecutive AFC championship games 3 years running. I think the Patriots were the only other team with such a long streak. So that's still pretty impressive on the Chiefs' part. I do expect them to be back there in some way this year. We'll see what happens. The Rams I'm going to put in the A tier. This is where Matthew Stafford is now going to be playing, and I'm really interested to see what him and Sean McVay do together. If it wasn't for the Cardinals, I'd be putting these guys in the S tier, but the Rams still have plenty of opportunity with a second place schedule to get that division title. I still think they'll be a wild card team, no matter what playoff team, no matter what happens in the division. The Steelers, I'm going to put these guys in the B tier reluctantly, and I'm going to be a little bit generous with that because the Steelers are a team that's never really horrible. Yeah, they might underperform sometimes, and yeah, I was just very rough on them in December, but they were still 12-4. That's still a good record. And the Steelers, I think Mike Tomlin is one of the only coaches in NFL history that has never had a losing record and won a Super Bowl. So that's pretty impressive. I mean, 8-8 is your worst record. It's now not possible to have a even record, but I still think Mike Tomlin could win 9 games. It's not unreasonable to see that. Carolina. Now, Carolina is a team that I've been hearing a lot about, and many people are asking my opinion on Sam Darnold and what I think about the Jets trade. I'm actually happy Sam Darnold is not on the Jets anymore. I think he has so much room to improve if you think of what's around him. I'm going to put the Panthers in the C tier, and a lot of people are groaning, rolling their eyes, but just hear me out. Third place schedule, dynamic offense. I think the defense, I got a couple questions about that, but with everything around Sam Darnold, and the Panthers also are a dark horse to possibly grab Kyle Pitts, you do that and you basically give Sam Darnold all kinds of room to improve. If he doesn't, then he wasn't really a third overall pick worthy pick. But if he does improve a lot with Matt Rule as his head coach, thank you, Adam Gase, for your complete incompetence. And he has a Ryan Tannehill-like rebirth of his career, which is possible with everything around him, then, this could be a very interesting team to watch. And speaking of the NFC South, the Falcons, I'm going to put these guys in the F tier. Defense, abysmal. I can respect the fact that Arthur Smith got Dean Pease to be the defensive coordinator over there because he is now the head coach, that being Arthur Smith. So I do expect the offense to look good. But you're asking Dean Pease a lot to make a mountain out of a really, really lot of molehills here. There's not a lot that the Falcons have on defense to be truly proud of, other than Grady Jarrett, but that's really not too much. I would expect maybe Atlanta to be a last place team that slightly improves, but not enough to where people actually care. New Orleans, with Drew Brees gone, that's always difficult to replace. I'll put these guys in the B tier because they still do have a good roster. Minus Drew Brees, it's a little bit tougher, but they still do have a lot of things to help their quarterbacks play well. They've still got Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, and so on and so forth. The Raiders, I'm going to put these guys in the C tier. The Raiders, people don't know this, but the last 3 years with John Gruden, they've actually improved every single year. 4-12, then 7-9, then 8-8 last year. So they improve a little bit every year, and the Raiders almost made the playoffs last year. So keeping an eye on the Raiders this year, I think their schedule is going to be a little bit easier this year, in my opinion, because they do have the, I believe, NFC East. They do have some games against the AFC North, like the Bengals, that are pretty winnable. A second place schedule doesn't do you any favors because you do have teams like the Dolphins, who you beat last year but could be a bit more tougher this year, and teams like the Colts. But the Raiders, I think, have a lot of potential to improve, and I think this is the year they start to do it. Washington, this is a tricky one. If Ryan Fitzpatrick starts, this team could win the division again. If not, then it might be more difficult. For now, I'll put them in the C tier until we get that question more, solidified down the stretch. Houston, F tier. I don't even need to explain this. Arizona, these guys have one of the best off seasons in the league. They have been a team that has quietly been improving a lot, and I'm going to put them in the A tier. I think that this is a team that almost made the playoffs with what they had last year, but they had a little bit of a falling from grace in December. Bad things happened to them then. But Arizona, I think, will improve this year by a net 2-3 games this year. Buffalo, these guys can go in the S tier. Really nobody in the division is going to really challenge Buffalo that much except for maybe one more team that we have on this list. But Buffalo is the real deal, and they were the AFC Championship runner-up last year, and they played like it through and through. Green Bay, speaking of conference championship runner-ups, Green Bay also going to go in the S tier. Nobody in their division can make a push for the title. I think the Vikings could make a wild card push down the road, but not for the division. Los Angeles Chargers, I'm going to put them in the, I'll say B tier, and I'm going to be generous with that. I think Justin Herbert is going to take some positive strides in year 2. Having a third place schedule, I think, will be, I think bittersweet because you do have teams like the Patriots who will give you trouble. You have teams like Cleveland, who that's going to be a great matchup, by the way. And then I believe they have the AFC North and the NFC East. So you have basically a medium strength of schedule. Philadelphia, speaking of NFC East, Philadelphia, F tier, never truly found their form since they won the Super Bowl. They did have 2 playoff berths after that in their own right, but it wasn't the same, and it didn't feel like it was the same, and never truly looked the same. Seattle, I'll put Seattle in the B tier because they usually still stay pretty consistent in terms of how they play. They're still usually a pretty decent team. Jets, F tier. I know they're going to have the second overall pick and 2 first-round picks this year, and their offseason's been So I don't think the Jets are going to really, improve enough to make a dent in the AFC East, to make a dent anywhere. They might improve from 2 wins, but that's not saying much. The Ravens, I'm going to put in the S tier. This is a team that is consistent. The last 3 years, they've had double-digit wins. Only other teams to do that are Kansas City and New Orleans. Green Bay could join that club next year, as could Buffalo. But right now, Baltimore is a team that, you don't really want to bet against, because they do surprise a lot of people that underestimate Lamar Jackson, and they have improved. I mean, their offseason's been, I'll say, decent. Hasn't been spectacular, no giant splashes, but you do have Sammy Watkins coming over, Kevin Zeitler coming over for the offensive line, and there's rumors Justin Houston will be visiting with them this week, so that could be interesting. So we'll keep an eye on Baltimore and see what they do with the draft as well. Bengals, I'm going to put in the F tier, and I hate to do this because the Bengals aren't really, they have basically a bum rap because of their coach being incompetent and Joe Burrow just not having enough around him. But I think Joe Burrow could actually take the Bengals to new heights, and I'm really fascinated to see what he does in year 2. He could be comeback player of the year for all we know. If it doesn't go to Prescott, it'll probably go to Joe Burrow. So I'm going to keep an eye on that, and I think having a last place schedule could be very helpful for Joe Burrow this year. Which leaves me to New England. This team had arguably the best offseason in the entire NFL. For those of you who think Cam Newton was a bad idea, I would advise you to really rethink what they did and understand that he's adapting to a new type of team, and this is his second year, and I'm going to make a video probably about the Patriots offseason as a whole and assess everything, but I'm going to put these guys in the A tier. I mean, these guys were 7-9 and they had opt-outs, and they never truly were a bad team. They just dropped from grace, having a first place schedule and so many things that left, not just Brady, but Hightower opting out. I think Patrick Chung opted out. I mean, you had players that really were not near the potential that you're used to. But I think New England is going to improve. I mean, they've already improved on paper. I think they can improve, on the schedule too. And that is all of my projections. And if you like what you saw, I'll see you in the next one.